You can take the phone.
All right. Welcome everyone to our Learn at Home information session for parents navigating education during the pandemic. We at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills are serving as your host for this conversation. My name is Jennifer McLaughlin and I'm the Director of Religious Education at the UU Church of the South Hills. We often call it Sunny Hill, so if you hear us saying Sunny Hill, that's what that means. The mission of our congregation is to promote a more just and compassionate community both within and beyond our walls. We're committed to social justice, lifelong spiritual learning and practice, and building bridges, not walls. I'm joined today by Miss Bethany Thornton. She's our membership and outreach manager, and she's going to introduce our panelists.
All right, guys, I'm so glad to see all of your faces. I feel like I haven't seen some of you for so long. And I'm glad that you took some time out to join us this evening. I'm sure everybody is feeling a little bit stressed out at the moment. A lot of changes coming. And I know that, we have some great panelists tonight that have children ranging from like elementary age through college graduates. And the one thing that's probably different with us than with you guys is like, this was a decision that we weren't thrown into, right? We really had the time to think about things and to make big plans. And I feel like you guys are in a much different situation because it's like, here you go, and you're off, right? So, but I do think that no matter if you're home, if you've dropped out of, like, withdrawn from the school district completely, or you're doing the online learning through your district, I do think that there are some things that our panelists have probably experienced over the years and have learned about and can probably share with you. You don't need to recreate the entire wheel about everything, right? So I do say that I hope that they can give you some information this evening that can help you go into the school year just feeling a little bit more relaxed, feeling like you can do this, and it's going to be okay in the end, no matter what you've chosen and no matter what you continue to choose after this year, it's all going to be okay. And so this evening we have Tanya Broaded with us. So when I say your name, just wait. We have Mary Alice Chaffin, we have Jody McLaughlin, and we have Geneva Pullen. So we're gonna do just some brief introductions from our end of things, and then we'll get started with just some questions and discussion and stuff. So I'll start. I do work at Sunny Hill part-time as the membership and outreach manager. I've been there for about 5 years now. And I also homeschool my kids, some of them at this point, some of them have gone on to school at this point as well. But my kids are 17. I have a daughter who's 17. She's a high school senior, so she's kind of gotten the shaft this year. I have a 15-year-old son, a 13-year-old son, and a 10-year-old son. And we started homeschooling right from the beginning. So my kids never went to school when they were younger. But my daughter Stella and my son Aiden did start public high school in 9th grade, each of them. So Aiden's going into 10th grade this year, and Stella is going into her senior year this year. And so they're going to be like a weird combination of things this year. But my 13-year-old's doing an online cyber school, and my 10-year-old's just doing traditional homeschooling still. So we've tried a lot of different things. And one thing you'll probably hear us say very often throughout tonight is like, I have 4 kids, and the same thing doesn't work for all of them by any means. They're all so different. And what works for one person may not work for the other. So that's been kind of like the experiment through this whole thing, is like getting to know your kids and finding out, what works for them. So yeah, I've loved our homeschooling journey. I've made great friends along the way. Our days are weird and unusual and fun and sometimes stressful, and I want to throw them, to the curb sometimes. But today was a weird mix of like schooling stuff. We spent the afternoon at the creek with friends. We might have been listening to the Beastie Boys while Finn cooked dinner this evening. So it was just a weird, wonderful day in the Thornton house, and it's never the same, and I wouldn't change it for anything. So that's me, and I'm going to pass it on to Tanya.
Hi, so I have 2 kids. I have one that is 11 and he is starting 6th grade. and another, my daughter is 9 and she is starting 3rd grade. We started homeschooling. Wyatt was in 1st grade in Montessori school, and we pulled him out after he finished 1st grade. We did it for multiple reasons. One reason was that it seemed like he just had the weight of the world on him, and we just felt like we can do a better job. And then my daughter, she finished preschool, and then we started her in kindergarten for homeschooling, and it was working really well with our son, so it made sense with her. It worked out really well for her because she had some vision issues, and so we were able to slowly work on reading while she did vision therapy. And so it actually kind of was like a blessing in disguise that we ended up doing homeschooling, because it actually worked really well for her, or works really well for her. We don't necessarily follow the Montessori method anymore. I did become certified in 1st through 3rd grade because it made me feel better jumping into it. But to be honest, that was more about me feeling better about it than actually how much we've used it. We used a lot of different things, and yeah, we also have a very different day depending on things. We do have schedules, but our schedule is more like a rhythm than very structured, although we do have some like structured classes. But our days tend to be to have a lot more of a rhythm, is what I would say. But so I look forward to helping you guys.
All right, thank you. Let's see, let's go on. And real quick, before we go on to the next person, I just want to say that not that you have to be by any means, and actually sometimes it can be a hindrance, but I was a school teacher. I was a special education teacher before I had my kids. And so I've done all of the panelists' kids evaluations at the end of the year. So it helps to know someone who can do evaluations, because that takes one thing off of your list to stress about. So we can talk about that later, though. I just didn't want to forget about it. So I'm going to move on to Jody now.
Hi, yeah, my name's Jody. I have 4 kids. I have a 21-year-old daughter who started homeschooling in 5th grade. We had moved here from out of state, and my older 2 did 1 year in Mount Lebanon, and then we started what was going to be just 1 year of homeschooling, and is now going on 11 years. So, so my 21-year-old is a college grad. She became a certified teacher after homeschooling. I have an 18-year-old son who just graduated high school and is taking college classes online. I have a 16-year-old 11th grader who is homeschooling and also dual enrolled at CCAC, so taking some of his classes there. And then I have a 10-year-old 5th grade daughter who is homeschooled. So yeah, it's obviously worked for us. This was not where I saw myself. I'm a certified teacher as well, although I don't have my certification in Pennsylvania. I'm certified in New York, where we moved from. But yeah, I can just echo all of the things that, you know, everyone else has said here.
Great, thanks, Jody. Let's move on to Mary Alice.
Hi. We have one son. He is 15, and he is a dual enrolled high school sophomore. So he does traditional homeschooling and then also takes many of his classes at CCAC. He started that last year at 14 as a freshman. And just to let you know that as we evolve in our journey, I now see myself much more as a homeschool facilitator rather than a teacher. Because there is a certain part where you can't teach some of this stuff. It's above my pay grade. And so it's my job to farm out the appropriate things for his learning goals and all of that. And it's okay. Like, I feel it was very freeing to me to realize that being just a facilitator for this was helpful. So we did actually start out in school when he did and hindsight is 2020, but we wanted full day kindergarten for our kid because he loves school, and the homeschoolers are like rolling their eyes right now at me. So we put him in a private school, and he spent kindergarten first and part of second grade in a private school that turned out to be not a good fit for our family in any way, shape, or form, and abruptly pulled him out in the middle of second grade. So although not the same as what you guys are going through this year, I do know that feeling of, oh my God, what am I going to do? Never had occurred to me to do this on our own. So we put him in PA Cyber. And I, for one, am really thankful for the cyber schools because I think that they have the right place. I'm thankful we have them as a choice for people because I do think that they serve a need that's out there. But cyber schools, I have found, are kind of like the gateway to homeschooling because once we had a cyber school schedule and I could see for the first time how my kid really learned. I mean, I remember having lightning bolt feeling of like, wow, my kid actually has a learning style and it's fitting for him. And then we were off to the races, and he spent the last part of the second half of his second grade year. Then we did an accelerated program to do third grade. And then we just went straight to traditional homeschooling and found a great tribe of friends and mentors, several of whom are on this call right now, and who held my hand and showed me this other way of doing things. So we have been through a lot of different types when he was younger of schooling. So that's kind of our journey to here.
Mary Alice. And last but not least, Geneva. Hi, Claire.
Hello. So Claire showed up. She's like, can I sit in? And I'm like, I think so. We might ask you to leave, but I can leave if
We might ask her questions. Yeah.
well, but seriously, if you want the perspective of somebody who's been homeschooled their whole life. So Claire has never, ever been to school. Until she went to college, she was never in school. She never had a desire to go to school. She was curious when her friends were going to high school, and then she went to an orientation at the high school and found out how early you get up and said, no, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm Geneva. We have lived in Mount Lebanon since 2001. 2 kids, Claire's 22. So Claire is a college grad. So she made it through never going into a school room and managed to get into college and out of college with several grants and scholarships. So, don't worry about that part. I have Elliot too, who's 18. He just graduated high school, and he will have an associate's degree in December. Claire did the same path. She had an associate's degree December after graduating high school. That is absolutely not necessary or a requirement, because we've all, like everybody here has talked about dual enrollment. It's just an option. Like that's a thing that you can do. What we ended up doing was, because when you get to the high school level and it starts to get intimidating, we used junior and senior year, we've completely outsourced to CCAC. I mean, you don't need to worry about, do I know advanced math? No, somebody else does. You never need to worry about that. We tried some different things. We did cyber school one year. Wasn't the greatest, didn't love it. Way too much structure. Way too many things the kids weren't interested in. And I have some interesting things to tell you about that, but I'll save it for later if it comes up. But it was not the best for us. So we have always homeschooled. Elliot dipped his toes into high school because he's very social. So he went for 1 year to high school, came back to homeschooling, discovered he could still have the social experiences because you can go to high school and take 2 electives as a homeschooled student. You don't have that option as a cyber schooled student because funding is diverted. But if you're purely homeschooled, you can do that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I like as an overview. I made some notes. Electives, yeah. So we've always homeschooled. We managed to get kids into and through college. Cyber school was not a great fit for us. And one of the things that we did, and I don't hear a lot of people mentioning that, we were big into unschooling. So we did a whole lot of unschooling. Basically, that's eschewing textbooks or formal classrooms or formal learning for student-directed learning and what they're interested in. And then just, as Mary Alice said, facilitate that learning. Find a way for them to find out this information that they want to know. So when you feel like you're the teacher, you're not the teacher. You are just the person who makes that possible, who kind of leads them down the path. And sometimes it can be more work than, teaching, I guess, but you can almost any experience your child has, you can quantify that as an education, as a learning experience. So I think the big thing that I want to say at the start is don't get tense. Don't worry that you're not a teacher, that you have to manage all these pieces of your life. You just have to make sure that they get what they need, and that what they need may not be, duplicating school, and it probably won't be duplicating their experience in school.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Geneva. So guys, from those of you who are joining us this evening, I have some questions that we were going to go through and talk about, but just I'm going to ask you to tell me, is there anything that you want to know about, or that you have questions about, or that you're feeling really anxious about, that we can make sure that we touch on while we're talking this evening? Is there anything that really sticks out to you, like you're freaking out about? Do my kids have to wake up at 6 a.m. and be at the kitchen table all day or something like that? Is there anything like that? Well, feel free, while we're, if anyone wants to say anything, maybe it'll be helpful if you do the hand, you can raise your hand and we can call on you, or you can feel free to type in the chat at any time if we're not touching on something that you think is important. But the things that we really wanted to touch, we thought were important to touch on tonight, because like we said at the beginning, I know not some of you guys are choosing to completely homeschool. You're done with Mount Lebanon or wherever you are, and you're going to do your own thing. Some of you guys have chosen to stay with the district, and it's a whole new world for you as you just try to figure out what your schedule is going to look like and where everybody's going to go during the day so that they have a little bit of space, and how is everybody going to see their friends and stuff like that. So we thought routines and schedules, space, socialization, family dynamics, and self-care would be the things that we really touched on. If you think that there's anything more that you would want to hear about, please make sure you let us know, because if you get us talking, we could probably be on here till midnight, and none of us really want that to happen. So we're a bunch of talkers, and we obviously like what we do with our kids, and so I don't want to just go off in one direction where everybody's like, that doesn't even pertain to us, and they're bored. So feel free to speak up or to put anything in the chat about, questions you might have or concerns you might have, or, anything you want us to touch on. So, all right, Jen, what do you think? Do you want to start with routines? Is that a good one to start with?
Yeah. And so I already started talking with Tanya about this, and I loved what I learned from her. So I would really love for her to at least start by answering these questions about routine. So specifically, the question is, so I didn't actually get to talk about my kids. I've got two kids, Benjamin and Jack, and they are, one is going into first grade and one is going into fourth. And we'll be all virtual, at least for the first 9 weeks. And I and my husband are both full-time working parents, and we both are currently working from home, which is great. But so a lot of my personal questions are trying to how do I do this? How do I figure this out? What do we do with our space? But the one thing I wanted to start with is routine. So like one thing that we talked about the other night was, how do you get the day started? I know I heard from Erin the other night, like maybe go for a walk before school starts to like transition to the start of the day. How do I get the ball rolling to differentiate between like rolling out of bed in whatever you went to bed in and plopping down on your computer and expecting to be successful? So Tanya, would you start with how to start the day?
Yeah, I'll try to remember what I said. So we, like I mentioned, we particularly more, like I like to think of it more as a rhythm that we go by. And when I mean rhythm, I mean that like we still kind of have a structure to the day, but it is, unless if there's a specific class or a place that we need to go, for us, it's not like, okay, exactly at 8 a.m., everyone is up and everyone is doing whatever. What we typically do, so my son Wyatt is going into sixth, and then my daughter Lila, who is going into third. Last year, what was really helpful is that after breakfast, we would do what is typically called like a circle time. And so we would have breakfast, and then we would sit at the table. We would typically light a candle, and we would read poetry. And that would be the start of our day. And that was kind of an indication to them that, okay, now we're transitioning. So my kids in particular seem to really work very well when they know that we're transitioning into something. A lot of times, though, I do sneak things in and they don't even realize we're homeschooling, because you could just do that. But things like, for example, math and English, like grammar or reading, I try to hit those as much as I can. It's not always every day, but you know, those are the two that I'm always like, okay, we need to do math, we need to do this, because of the amount of practice it takes. And so typically what we do is do like a little circle time in the morning to start it. And because they're in different age groups, and you know, one is reading the poetry out loud and the other one I'm reading too, or whatever, but just kind of helps start our day. And we've really liked that. Typically it's called circle, or like a circle time in the morning. You'll find that in other homeschooling things and how others may do other things, but
This may seem like a really minor question, but for some families it might be a big deal and something different. Do you start every day at the same time?
no. We start, so typically it would be between when we're like on a roll, when we're like in the season of homeschooling. So even between the seasons, like weather wise, we have seasons in homeschooling. So for example, in the fall, we typically do a lot of things outside in the afternoon, but we do like the harder stuff in the morning. And so like the math and the language. And so that's, so we would do that in the morning and start, and when we're doing it that way, usually we start between like 8:30, 9:30. There's like a nice, you know, maybe one wants to help me cook breakfast, or others like we have to go somewhere by noon, so we need to hurry up and get this going. And so it all kind of just depends on the day. And then season wise, like in winter, we tend to sleep actually kind of later, and we're like more cozy and we read more and we do more crafts in winter. Still trying to hit the math and language, but it has a different feel, and so does summer. We homeschool throughout the year, but so our waking up time shifts between seasons. I used to want to be like, okay, at this time we do it this way and everything. And what I find out is that I'm just actually like fighting with them. And so if we just go with like a rhythm and like just kind of going with it, it's helpful. And also the amount of homeschooling, like the time that it takes to actually go through things, is really like shocking, like how fast you can go through math that might take a whole week in public school, but it takes you maybe an hour or 2 hours during the week. And so that was really shocking to me, how fast we can move through things. So that also helps not have to wake up at a certain time if we have to.
So how many of you guys have to be up at a certain, how many of your kids have to be up at a certain time and logged on by a certain time? What time is that? Stella has to be logged on by 7:10, which is really early for high school. See?
Vivian needs to be logged on by 8 and Annalie by 8:30.
Yeah, we're 8:30.
I now need to be logged on
8.
by 8 to get them up.
Right. So that's a big difference. So, you know, for homeschoolers, if you're out late the night before because you went to something that you probably shouldn't have done during the week, whenever you have to get up early, like it doesn't always matter for us, right? Because we can get up sometimes later and stuff. But when you have to stick to that schedule, it makes it a little tougher. And I do, man, when my kids started high school and their bus came at 6:30, that was a big life adjustment for us. So I think there are things that you can take from what Tanya said to like help your day. You know, something that helps my kids. So Henry's doing cyber and he did cyber last year. It gives him a little more structure than I have been able to provide. So he likes that. It's just better for his personality. But, you know, just making him a cup of tea and, you know, lighting a candle, like Tanya said, that can help. Or, you know, just trying to make him feel comfortable. Some people have their kids wake up and, you know, do the morning. I mean, I like my kids to do a morning routine unless it's like a winter day and we want to stay in our pajamas and read books all day. But I mean, it does help a little bit, I think, to like get up, put your stuff on your bed, you know, put some clothes on. They don't have to be, I mean, I read somewhere that someone's making their kids wear uniforms for homeschooling. And I thought that was like kind of crazy, but at the same time, I kind of get the fact that like it's really awesome to stay in your pajamas all day. It really, really is. But at the same time, sometimes it doesn't feel quite as productive. So like, you know, just getting up and getting moving and putting on comfy clothes that are not pajamas, but just like something that you can be comfy and casual in. Sometimes that can even be like the routine of the morning.
Day pajamas.
We do something at our house.
Pajamas, right here.
This is what we do at our house. My kid likes structure. We're also pretty spontaneous. So how did we make that happen? And so since he's been about 8, we look at the schedule for the week. We know what we have on an actual schedule. Like, are we going roller skating? Or do we actually have a class somewhere or whatever? And we have what's called up and ready by the day. And we set that time. And then my kid is in charge of getting himself, now that he's 15, he can do this. But he gets himself up, dressed, fed, and then messing around time. Like, he has a new bike. So his up and ready for the day today was at 8:30. He was up at 6 because he wanted to mess with this new bike that he's putting all these new gears on and stuff. He knew he needed to, that was his time. So he backed up his alarm time for himself because he knew that I expect him to be ready by 8:30 because we've got things to do. He has a class that starts. It guarantees me that, you know, teeth are brushed, deodorant is used. And then when we get that awesome call of, hey, we're going to go out sledding, it's snowing, we're dropping everything, then I'm not fighting to get a kid ready or whatever. And that then lets us be more spontaneous because we're actually ready for it. You know, we've gotten chores done or whatever. So maybe for some of you that have that, because it is hard when you first come home to separate you're at the dining room table. Is this the dining room table or is this my desk? You know, like it's hard to blend those. I've been there, I get that. But at least if you can give maybe some of the older kids the expectation that, hey, you do have some of your own time and this is the time that things shift. And maybe that's when you're, you know, lighting candles or doing something together, but at least give them that time to know that the hanging out at home is over and we're going to switch gears into a more learning school time or log on to this. It's not like Saturday at home, you know, on a weekend or something. But we just call it up and ready time, and we always check in and know that's the up and ready time.
I
Well,
think
even as unschoolers, we did something very similar, where it's like everybody should be downstairs in their clothes, and in their clothes were day pajamas. That's a possibility. Whatever, if we're not going anywhere. But everybody should like make their bed and be downstairs and bathed or whatever, you know, however we're going to start the day. And we had our own rituals to start the day, like if we were going to be home, but, and like, you know, the way Tanya put it as a rhythm, we, you know, one kid would practice music while the other read, and then it would switch. And, you know, we had things that it's like the day starting like this. But one thing that we did do, and I know that like a lot of religious homeschoolers will start with a devotional. We had the intellectual devotional. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. And it's just little one-page excerpts of science, biographies, history, something just to get you to start thinking, something to get us to start talking about something. There were days when the intellectual devotional would like send us off into a rabbit hole, and we would research something like completely off base of what we thought we would do for the day. But those routines were kind of important, don't you think? Like to get started. Here's the homeschooler.
Yeah, it helped you get in the zone. So like you like Mary Alice was saying, like so that you could like go off in a direction that you wanted to, but like so that you had that structure to start out with.
And also more like guidelines, really, you know, like the Pirates Code. So, you know, if something else came up, you were ready for that. So if the weather was beautiful and somebody said, hey, you guys want to go for a hike this morning? We could table what we had in mind for the morning and go for a hike or whatever. I understand that that's like not a lot of the situations with cyber schooling or whatever, like completely virtual schooling. But I think you can take some of those elements and start your day like a certain way, or, you know, just get in that sort of that rhythm, as Tanya put it, which I really like, where you say, okay, this is what I expect. So you can do that with your little kids. I expect you to, you know, be up, put some clothes on, have your teeth brushed before you walk downstairs. You know, we're going to have breakfast, and then we're going to start on the thing we're starting on. You know, whatever that may be, whether it's we're going to take a walk, or we're going to practice music, or we're going to read a book, or whatever it is, or we're going to log in to our online classes. So it is really, really important, I think, to just have that sort of expectation.
I think for those of you who maybe are doing the like the online school through Mount Lebanon or Scott, you said, maybe even ask your kids, you know, how their day started at school, because they may be able to tell you, you know, the kinds of things that they did when they were in school. They're just coming from that, and they may go back to that if you choose to put them back in, but they may have an idea of something that would help them. So, and I don't know, I was a high school teacher. I don't know how elementary students start their day, especially now, but they may have an idea as well as what would signify the start of the day for them based on the grades that they've come from, and, you know, ask for their feedback too, and say, hey, you know what, we got to be a team here, because you now as the parent are guiding your kids and getting all of this work done, even though it's going to be given to them sometimes synchronously, sometimes asynchronously from their teachers. But if you ask them for their opinions too, it's like more a bit of teamwork. And then they may be a little bit more invested, you know, that way.
Yeah,
Right.
buy-in's important.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a really important thing even for us like virtual folks, because I know even for me, the drive to work, which I'm no longer doing, sort of was my transition time. Like the thing I chose to listen to, 30 minutes in the car by myself. And I think probably for Maddie, me driving her to school was that same thing. It was like you have 10 minutes to sort of like get your game face on, think about your day, focus on what you're going to do. Now you get out of the car. So I hadn't thought about it, but I think that's probably a really important thing to consider and talk with her about, like what will be the thing. Because it was a weird thing for me to start working from home. I just sort of like raced to my desk. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know it changes too as the kids change in age too. I mean, when my kids were a lot younger, and even with Finn now still, he loves to get up early before we're going to start our school day, and like we'll snuggle on the couch and I'll still read aloud to him. He's a great reader, but he still values that like reading aloud time. So that's part of when we do that, and it's cozy, and I don't make him get dressed and ready before that. So we'll snuggle on the couch for a while and read, and then he'll go do his morning routine and come back and ready. So, and I mean, for some kids, I know some homeschoolers, with screens and stuff, I don't really like the screens to be turned on first thing in the morning in our house, just because then it's hard to get them back off again. But some people are really great about it. And so like they do what Mary Alice was saying, like they know they're starting at 8 a.m. and they get up at 6 because they want to watch a show before, just to get, their time in, or listen to something, or go for a walk. Like Erin said, like take your dog for a walk, just to kind of have, I think that having a routine is much more important than a schedule. A schedule is important if you have to be on at a certain time, but a routine is just like a feeling, kind of a way to like get into your brain that you're starting your day or you're starting something. Yes, Tanya.
There's going to be definitely days where it's going to be hard to get your child to sign on and to do the class. And especially if you're doing where your schedule is already set and they have to be on at 8 or 8:30. One thing that we do sometimes whenever they have a class that they have to do but they don't want to is like, okay, well, we sometimes do tea or light a candle or make them feel, okay, well, maybe you could go outside and do it or whatever. But then sometimes I'm like, okay, well, then afterwards we'll go on a hike, or afterwards we'll go take a walk, or something that maybe during lunch we'll do a little picnic outside if we can, or sometimes it's helpful to have like a small incentive to get them to just get them going sometimes, because sometimes once they get going they're fine, but I could see it being a challenge at some point to get them like, all right, you need to get up, get on the class. But having those little ideas, or like in your back pocket, okay, today we're gonna go take the dog for a walk after this class when you're not synchronous, and we'll take a small break and then we'll move or whatever. But I would suggest having a few of those ideas.
Yeah. And we had a question Maren asked in the chat that says, do you prepare your day in advance or do you wing it on the day? Like, for example,
Yes.
Like, do you look at like them the day before, or do you like prepare for science and have everything laid out for the science experiment? And I think most of us probably have in our minds that we'll have it all done before. I mean, I'll let you guys speak for yourselves, but for me, I started off the year really strong and I am good and I have it all in line, and then like kind of life gets the best of me, and sometimes I don't open the book until the day of and I'm like, oh shoot, I was supposed to make a triangle out of cardboard and da da da. So then we'll race around to do that. So some weeks are by the seat of my pants. Some weeks I'm really prepared and organized, and everything in between. So I do think, I don't use a particular curriculum that's all just one thing. I have bits and pieces from everywhere that I've put together. And so some of those things are open and go, and some of those things are like putting them together myself. So yeah, there are weeks that I feel really on top of things and weeks that I feel like, holy cow, I have no idea what I'm doing. And this is after I've been homeschooling for a really, really long time. And I think let the rest of you guys on that. Does that sound like you at all, what I'm saying?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Well, we've never used a boxed or a full curriculum. We do, for the most part, Owen, from third grade through probably about the start of ninth, we were much more what's called a project-based schooling. So in our family, we pick like 6 or 7 topics that my kid has intense interest in. I'm going to give an example of one that is engines. Like when he was like in 5th grade, anything that had a motor, an engine, vroom, vroom, that was his jam. And so we went very intense on that. Now that works for my kid and his learning style. That does not work for everyone. But his math was everything, math, spelling, English, you name it. It was all part of this unit. So I had to be somewhat prepared. The topics we knew the topics at the beginning of the year. He had helped choose them. And I had to know what I was doing in terms of like, okay, so we're going to focus on this type of math that pertains to this, or these type of writing assignments that pertain to this topic. But I didn't know it every day. And the folks, we know a lot of homeschoolers or people who know, they know in September what they're going to be doing on March 17th. It's all lined out. That's not us. I had an idea of what was going to happen, but I certainly didn't know what was going to happen that day. We also like to keep things kind of loose because we don't homeschool. We're out in the world typically with lots of supplemental classes and things like that. So I had an idea, but didn't know the details of that particular day. But yes, I did know before I taught it, I knew what I was going to be doing. Might have been the night before, but that I reviewed it, but yeah. So it doesn't have to, I just don't want anybody to feel like you have to know exactly and have it all timed out with like really fabulous planners. Like, because hopefully those planners are going to get all messed up and you don't want to feel guilty about it later when some really great opportunity comes up. This is a chance here to do some really great things that you would never had an opportunity to do. And so for those of you that are just going to be doing this short time, there's going to be really amazing things that happen outdoors, even in your backyard one day, that they wouldn't have seen because they were in the building instead of at home. So don't try to stick too close to the schedule.
This makes me think about regulation for Pennsylvania. So the state of Pennsylvania does have some regulations, but they're really general. And it's like you need to teach fire safety and English language. And it's like a small little paragraph. And there's also a time requirement. And so I would encourage you guys, like, just so you know, there are state laws and you should check those out. But I find them to be very loose and free. Like, you don't have to have a curriculum. There is no particular curriculum for the state of Pennsylvania. And so, yeah, I second the whole like taking opportunities as much as you can, because that's kind of like the awesome part about homeschooling. And even if you have schedules, if you're doing like the online with schools for like the next 9 weeks, you're still like, there still might be these awesome opportunities to go take hikes or to make lunch together or things like that, that you might not always have in the future. So I encourage you to take those opportunities because they might not be there later. It's one of the wonderful things about homeschooling.
To touch on that really quickly, like my daughter's a senior and I know some of you guys have older kids too. Man, the time goes by really quickly, and some of our like most treasured moments are just like those stolen moments in the day where we did like make dinner together, went on a hike on a Tuesday afternoon, you know? So there, especially for those of you that have to be online for a certain time, you might not be able to do that exactly at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, but you don't have your commute anymore. So maybe you can squeeze it in the afternoon or something like that. So just, you know, try to be spontaneous when you can.
Just to seize on what Bethany just said, absolutely take advantage of any spare time. And just, this is weird. This whole time is so weird, especially for people who have no intention of continuing to homeschool or who never had any intention of, you know, being at home or doing school from home. just take the little bits that you get and think of them as an opportunity instead of a burden. Because like that, your kids are going to be grown and done, and you'll just like look back nostalgically at those moments when you fought constantly to get them to do things. You'll go, wait, we really had a great time together. I'm really grateful that we had that time. So take advantage of it. That sounds a little like, I don't mean it to sound condescending in any way. That's not what I mean. But you have a chance right now to just kind of enjoy some time together. Just relax about everything. They're not gonna get behind in things. They're pretty resilient. They'll catch up really quickly to whatever they're supposed to be learning right now. Just, yeah, enjoy the opportunities that this little bit of time gives you.
I'm going to skip ahead to one of the questions. I will come back to yours, Miriam, in a minute, but this kind of leads into Aaron's, because I'm looking at 3 people I know of right now who work full-time, who are going to be doing this, who, you know, both parents work full-time. And that is challenging. We're talking, most of us are talking from the point of view of being stay-at-home parents. I know when my kids were very young, I stayed at home, and I started working at Sunny Hill about 5 years ago, and I started at 10 hours a week, which seemed like a lot then, and now I'm up to 25, which, and I'm still homeschooling. So it's much more challenging trying to work and do these things at the same time. I do have to say that, like, I am very, very lucky that I have a dad who lives close and is retired, and on Tuesday mornings when I have to go into the office, he is available to come and sit with the kids and just kind of oversee what they're doing and hang out and teach them things. And most of the time that I work, my schedule is very flexible. I work a lot of evenings, Saturdays and Sundays, and so I'm able to work around our schedule. But I do see, I'm looking at you, Rebecca, Francisca, and Aaron, and I don't know if anyone else, and Jen, you guys all, I know you guys all work full time. And Tiana, do you work, or are you home? Are you home? It's just a different ball game when you're working versus staying home. So I don't want us to sound flippant either about like, love all this time with your kids, it's great, it's that, because I'm sure that it's going to be stressful too, to make sure everybody's needs are being met. Does anyone have anything to say about that? I mean,
So
go ahead, Tanya.
last year we built a house, I managed building a house, selling a house, moving for a period of time. We didn't have a place to live because our house was still being built, but we sold our house. And although that was not a job that I had a boss that was like on me and I had like those kind of deadlines, what I did find out during that period of time, because it did feel like because I was the one that was running all that because my husband at the time was working, is that if I was not on top of my game, it felt like everything just like kind of crumbled. And what was very helpful for me is that on Sundays, I would take 2 hours and plan the week for what my strategy was, when I was going to clean, when I was going to have the kids do something, when they were doing like work versus like what our schedule was, like, oh, we're gonna go meet friends or they have a class or whatever. So last year there were periods of time that were incredibly like structured, because if I was not on top of it, everything like kind of crumbled. And so having a period of time, which kind of leads into that other question about office hours, I think that might be really helpful to people who are working, to have a period of time, maybe on a Sunday or a Saturday, where you could get extra help, that it's just you being able to focus and just like make a plan for your week, might be really helpful.
I think, I mean, for me, Maddie is on her own. I mean, unless she has a technical problem, there's never a time where I'll be able to sit with her or talk to her, not even over lunch, because of the way that my work schedule is. And so that's why, like that transition time thing, I think that's a good tip. That's time that that's time before she'll start school before I start work. But she's on her own. I need to set her up to be successful completely by herself.
Yeah.
Well,
And that might take even more planning than if you were right there, you know, like just.
I mean, I wouldn't help if I was
visit.
there. There's no way I'd be
Yeah.
helpful. So I don't mean it but like that. But I mean, will be online from 8 until 3. I mean, Francisca, isn't that what you get? It's like they're online all day. They have a 6-minute window between periods.
I don't know if all of it is online. It could. I think it depends on the teacher and on the day. But yes, they basically have a full school day.
But they will be expected to show up in every class.
Yes.
And they're taking attendance in every
Yes.
single class all
Yeah.
day long.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would recommend early on trying to identify a couple different ways they can do that. So, so how old are they again, Rebecca?
That's Maddie.
Um, Yeah, Maddie and Vivian are 12 going on 13, going into 7th.
Okay. So maybe, because that is hard to sit in one room like that and you're not having any interaction except through the screen. If it were me, I would look for 2 or 3 places they can do that in the house. Move the computer, take it with them for a change of pace. They're still required to set up and be online, but like, do you have a nice place on the deck or a porch that if they're getting antsy and need a change of pace and they can't come bugging you and like, you can't deal with, like you can't interact with them, but find 2 or 3 places that they know they've got good, Wi-Fi service or, good connectivity, a comfy place. Doesn't always have to be at that same desk. Obviously maybe not kicking back in their bed, but, just 2 or 3 places that they feel like they're empowered to go to with their work, because that might help them just at least to be in a different 4 walls around them, or even no walls and outdoors or something. But that would be one of the things, because I think that if they can be empowered to change it up a little bit on their own while they're still meeting the requirements for signing in, they're not looking to you to like, hey. So I might try something like that, at least one little idea.
There was also an idea that I think Mary Alice, you mentioned yesterday about having a place where they can, like those little exercise things that you could like pedal your feet, or one of those like exercise balls that you could sit on. Even if you
Or like a small trampoline, like that little like stationary trampoline.
Absolutely. I was going to say that, but I thought people would laugh. Yeah.
Oh no.
They were lifesavers.
When Owen was in 2nd and 3rd grade in cyber school, we had one of those old jumpy trampolines just off to the side of the area where he worked, so that when this was too much to be in front of the screen, he could just pop over, bounce. Yep. The other thing is these little cheapo for like 15 or 20 bucks off of Amazon. They're like bicycle pedals. They just sit on the floor. It's like a little exercise bike thing, but it's just the pedals. And that went under his desk, and he just pedaled like crazy, and then obviously like fidget stuff that's out of view, but it's actually kind of cool because now they can have some fidget stuff, something to mess with that maybe a teacher in the classroom won't let them have. But as long as they understand, then just keep it out of the camera view, fiddle away. I mean, in my world, if it helps. So.
I agree. And I know that when I have too many Zoom meetings in one day, I start to lose my mind. And I'm an adult who, has had years of practice with this kind of thing. So, it just gets to be challenging. So I think anything you can do to like change the scenery, change what, something for them to do tactile. I know Henry loves that, like, whatever it is, that stuff you pull, like not slime, but whatever that magic putty stuff is or whatever is good. Yeah.
We did make a treadmill desk. Sorry.
Oh, treadmill desk. Yeah, that's cool.
Today, my kids watched Generation Genius videos because we're trying to figure out gaps in their science curriculum and what they've learned and not learned. And it was really helpful for all 3 of them to have fidgets in their hands while they were watching the videos and figuring out kind of what they understood and didn't understand. So while my kids won't be in front of a screen all day, they will have some screen content to help them understand things and to help me give them a little bit of curriculum that I'm not teaching them. So definitely those fidgets seem really helpful, at least for them even to absorb material in a different way and be able to get some of their wiggles out while they were sitting there trying to just learn.
Yeah,
I get
that's
why
making me
can't
think of
have
you,
fidget.
Aaron Nath.
Yeah.
Aaron Nath, you know what I'm going to say, right?
All the fidgets?
No, like you sitting in the back of service crocheting, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I think that if I would have started knitting in high school, I could have sat through any lecture, any
Yes.
class. As long as my hands are busy, I can focus and pay attention for a really, really long time. But
I will
as soon as
say-
my hands are still, I'm like all over the place, right?
Yeah, I will say I have gotten busted on work meetings because they see me looking down frequently. Are you doing something
Wow.
else? No, just fidgeting. No, I mean, that's the thing. Like,
I mean-
Kaylee right now, I have a desk set up right next to me because I know for a lot of the time she's going to need to be on track. So we found this spring that she was very good at spending all day doing short assignments and spending the rest of the time watching YouTube videos and telling me she was still doing work. So I'm lucky
That's
that my
hard.
job
I
is,
mean, that is hard.
yeah, I'm lucky that my job's flexible enough that I'm not like constantly on all day, but I still have to get a certain amount of work done. So it's gonna be tough.
And I wonder if they'll be able to. So that is like one of the detriments of having an online kind of thing. I know for Henry with cyber, there are some good things about it, and there are some things that I'm like, oh shoot. Like he watches way too many YouTube videos, and he has them running in the background with his teacher up here in the corner sometimes, muted. So like, and I don't even know that he's doing it because I'm in another room, or even if I'm in the same room, I see the back of his computer. I'm not seeing any of his headphones on, right? So it happens.
Oh yeah, that's why she's sitting right next to me. Anywhere in the room she'd be with me, I'd be able to see her screen before she can change it.
That's not going to change. Elliot found out he was in creative writing with a friend of his at CCAC this term. They spent the whole time texting back and forth, talking about the other people in creative writing. So I don't think it's really going to change.
And I mean, public school, yep, same thing.
But that's social, right? I mean, come on, social learning.
Yeah, but you know what? The cyber schools and these teachers, you know, they got a whole, like, they figured this all out, or your teachers will soon figure it out, where they've got to do those, like, raise your hand, do the check mark thing. I mean, they're keeping those kids on their toes to make sure that they're actually listening and paying attention. I mean, that was a clear thing, at least in our experience, that they were engaged. Those kids were, it wasn't just a lecture thing. It was an engagement to keep them, to make sure that they weren't, like, you know, zoned off on a YouTube video on a different part of the screen. So I was pleasantly surprised at how engaging they kept it.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what it's like the first, you know, few weeks, because teachers have a rough job ahead of them, and I'm sure they're going to do their best and make it as engaging as they can for these kids. It's just some of the schedules I've seen, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of hours for these young kids to sit in front of the computer. So
And they're following regular
you might
school
have some,
hours.
yeah.
But I think
You may
it'll
just
get
wanna-
adjusted as they see that, Bethany. I think as the teachers see what's happening, that they can't duplicate a classroom experience online, that they can't
Right.
expect the kids to sit in front of a screen and do the exact same things, because it's not the same.
Right.
I think it's probably going to evolve.
I think so too. And I hope these, you know, 8 to 3 kind of classrooms where they have to be all day will now start to become a little bit more asynchronous, where like you log on Monday and they'll see you again on Wednesday and you have a couple assignments to do in between or something like that, just to keep it a little less crazy. All right, Daisy. Oh, did you want to say something, Tanya?
I just want to say that one suggestion for younger kids that helps with Lila is that sometimes she doesn't want to do something that's really difficult. And so if she has her My Little Pony that does math, everything is good. Like, so her My Little Pony does math, but Lila doesn't, or things like that. So that's really helpful. And I mean, sometimes like, you know, it might not work for older ones, but I mean, maybe like, as in like, okay, well, you know, because sometimes my son who's 11, I could see like little things of that a little bit, like, oh, he has a little, you know, little animal with him, or his plant. Sometimes the plant comes and does work with them. So sometimes that's really helpful. Just a thought.
Nice.
Bethany, do you think we could go to the question about space? Because I'd really like to have that one.
Yeah, but I want to just say one thing to Daisy, because this is like a really quick answer. She asked a question, and this is just for the homeschoolers out there.
Yep.
She's working from home. You have to have 180 days in for the homeschoolers. That's Pennsylvania law. So what do you count as a homeschooling day? And that makes me think of a conversation Tanya and I had the other day, because we're taking a bunch of Boy Scouts on a 5-mile hike on Friday. And one of the Boy Scouts can't go till 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock because he has homeschooling all day. And I was like, oh, she's new at this, because like that is like part of our homeschool day. Like that is what we're doing. And we're going to be using a compass and maps and doing a bunch of things. And it wasn't really on our plans for Friday, like for our homeschool day, but we've adapted and made it part of our homeschool day. So I would just highly encourage people, like, if it's a Saturday and your family goes on a hike and you're looking at plants and you're using a compass and all that stuff, that's a homeschool day. If you're at the library and then you come home and you spend 2 hours reading books together, that's a homeschool day. If you cook breakfast and lunch together and, you know, spend the rest of the day watching a documentary about, I don't know, nature, that's a homeschool day. So it doesn't have to look like, and I know, guys, this is just for homeschooling, so it's not for everybody, but it does not have to look like school. Most of us start off with school at home and realize that school at home is kind of hard to reproduce, and we get to the point where we really don't want to anyways, and kind of build learning into our days and into our lives. So most days, it's not hard to get 180 days, because most days you're learning something and doing something that counts as homeschool, especially when the kids are younger.
And that goes to what Miriam asked in the chat.
Yeah.
So I only have the one kid, and he is a pretty social kid. He's one of those mom. He talks all the time. He never shuts up. And so in order for me to do cooking, it became, well, you guys, a lot of you know him. In order to handle cooking, like once he got into like 8, 9, 10-year-old range, like I found a really great cooking curriculum, and he helped me. We do have a little bit of a weird, to me it seems weird, traditional family life where my husband comes home at 6 o'clock and we eat at 6. Dinner is at the table, and usually home cooked stuff, and our life has revolved that way, because then we go out and do other things. Like we have the rest of the evening after. So we've all had the meal, and I'm not making a bunch of meals, and it gets cleaned up and it's over. So I had to incorporate him into the cooking because I couldn't get it done. So finding ways to get your kids, or making a menu or something so that they can help you get that chore, your chore that you have to do, or if that's part of your world to do the cooking for dinner, have them help with that, or have them do the lunches and help with that. And then when my kid was about 10, we started him on financial literacy. And so he sat with us and paid bills every month now for years. That's how we pay the bills. So he sits and he knows all about, watches the interest rate on our credit card, all that stuff. It took my husband a little bit of time to feel comfortable with him knowing about our finances like this. But we've seen it, we've been able to see him transfer that knowledge into his own finances. Like, not that the 15-year-old has much, but honestly, he doesn't have much. So he has to budget, plan, earn, all of that. And so incorporating them into whatever those things are you need to do as best you feel comfortable, I think is a service to them, to help them see that this is what managing a household is like, and you are part of this household. And if we're going to stay home to school, this is part of that. So that's how we've handled a lot of those chore things to get done. We do not stay up late waiting till he's in bed to get our other stuff done. It gets done, in a more normal times, and we just incorporate him into it. That's the only way we found to do it for us. So.
Well,
But
and
I
then
also, oh, go
cooking's a
ahead,
school
Geneva.
day. Cooking's another 100 of your 180 days. If your kid is following a recipe, they're learning chemistry, they're learning fractions, they're learning home economics. It's a school day. So they've made something, a meal, school day. Did they go to an RE class with a particularly interesting subject and you guys talked about it afterwards? Did you look up something about it online? School day. So get into those 180 days, but also incorporating it into your life.
But this also makes it sound, you guys, like we are with our kids every minute focusing on their education. And you have to take breaks too, right? Like I have a great friend who homeschools who every day for an hour and a half, it's quiet time in the afternoon. And her kids go to their rooms, they read for 45 minutes, and then they have their tablet for 45 minutes. And that's like her time. She could do whatever the hell she wants. If she wants to read a book, she reads a book. If she has chores to do, she does chores. If she wants to, whatever she wants to do, that's what she does during that time, right? And some days it looks different than others. But I do think homeschoolers, like we're involved in our kids' lives a lot, but you definitely need to step back and have some time. So it's okay to say like, okay, it's 3 o'clock. You can watch something, go watch TV for an hour, or go outside and ride your bike, or just go read your book, any of those things, because I need a break and I have to make some phone calls, or I have to, I have a meeting for an hour online. I mean, those kind of things are going to happen. And I think that, you just kind of plan those into your day. And I do think that, like Miriam, a lot of people, like the pressure cooker, the Instant Pot and the crock pot become your friends, right? Like when you're thinking about meals, this year's different because we're not doing quite as much running, but a lot of times we're running around and we get home at 5 o'clock and we're like, oh my gosh, we're hungry and no one wants to cook. So, you throw some things in the Instant Pot, or you've had it in the crock pot for the day and that's going. So that's super helpful. And I mean, you can sit with your kids while they're working on their math and pay your bills if, they don't need you every minute of that math lesson or whatever. So you learn to fit those things in. It starts to look a little bit different than it once did, but you learn to fit those things into your day. And just to answer that question really quickly from Lacey, as an evaluator, I just ask people in their, to put together a portfolio or some sort of collection of work for the end of the year, and to show that you've done 180 days. And mostly it's just because that's what the PA state law says to do. And most of the time what people do is either like have a paper with like lots of little squares on it. They just put X's or check marks on the days they've done school, which usually is most days, or they have a calendar and they circle the days they've done. You don't have to write down what you've done on those days to count it as school. You just have to have something that shows you've done school those days.
And it doesn't have to be school. It's learning. If you facilitated learning on those days, you're fine. Don't get wrapped up in that.
I'm just laughing. I'm laughing because you also in Pennsylvania have the option of calculating hours as opposed to days. And I remember when Tanya Broaded first started homeschooling and she told me she was going to do that. And I was like, wow, really? Oh, I can't wait to see how this one turns out, because that sounds so unbelievably stressful. And I think it was like a month or two in and she was like, I'm done with that. So I would not, to any of you new homeschoolers, I would not recommend counting hours. I feel like you'll lose your mind. Just don't. Just count it as a day. All right, Jen. Oh, wait, what did you say, Jody? You said, let's see. Oh, that's a really important point to bring up too, right? Like, so in elementary school, a full day of school to get everything in is not 6 or 7 hours, right? Like you can often get things in 2 hours or 3 hours because you're working at your kid's pace and you're not trying to necessarily do everything that comes in a school day.
Yeah, the state of Pennsylvania does actually, this is what drove me nuts, is that it does not define a school day. So school day is not defined in the state of Pennsylvania 5 hours or 3 hours. And that's what actually drove me to do hours originally, because I felt like that was more calculable and it drove me nuts. But there's no definition of a school day in the state of Pennsylvania. You just have to have 180 of them. So take that for whatever it's worth. Don't do hours.
Was the question about if you're cooking and discussing like fractions and whatnot? You'll find that you do that anyway. Like it won't be, I have to prepare a fraction lesson. If you're like cooking something, that will come up. You know, you have an eighth of a teaspoon of something. We never in our family make one recipe of something. So we're doubling it. So we're doing math in our heads and stuff.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that was a question. I don't know who asked it.
That was me.
That was Tiana.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of cooking with the boys. You know, we make ice cream and we make bread, and we're probably going to make pasta soon and other things like that. But I don't make it a big educational experience. I just say this is what we're doing, and they come in and they read the recipe and we do it and we eat it. So I feel like there's value in that. And we're doing cyber, but still this is of interest to me in the homeschool community and, you know, just what I'm doing. I feel like it's still educational, but I didn't know if we did go to homeschool environment, if that kind of thing counts, or if there needs to be more discussion and more factual stuff involved.
Everything counts.
Everything counts.
And if you have measuring spoons out, those are fractions.
Yeah.
Measuring cups, those are fractions.
Okay. All right.
But
cool.
talk about a life skill that you're teaching your kids that is like going to continue on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just because it doesn't necessarily fit in an exact pocket that they have labeled in public school, it doesn't mean it's not educational or learning.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel like we're doing a lot of life skills, but I was just curious how that counts in homeschool and, you know, if we end up going in that direction.
Yep.
So there's some homeschoolers out there, they actually name their homeschool, like, for a variety of reasons. There's a million reasons to name your homeschool. We've never named our homeschool. What's that?
One real quick is for a resume if your kid is older and they don't want to go in the fact they were homeschooled.
Or teacher discounts. I mean, sometimes I just name it just so they can get a discount at Michael's, you know, which is a thing. But we've never had a name, but we definitely have a motto. It is said daily at our house, which is not for school, but for life we learn. That is the guiding principle of our homeschooling. It has been the day we walked out of that school, the private school. Not for school, but for life we learn. So like to me, I'm very much, and this is just where everybody has different ideas and different values and different goals. But it's really important to me to put a kid out there in the world that is self-sufficient, and you can't teach common sense, but man, you can try to guide it at least. And and luckily I have a kid that gravitates towards that. That is a good learning style for him. But if you can take just a tiny piece of that, like with the cooking, it's not for school you learn the cooking, it's for life.
Yeah.
And just kind of keep a little bit of that in there, that it doesn't have to be what the school district says is educational. It's because school will end and life will go on. And that's kind of where how we come at it from. So anytime you're like, is this schooly enough? Maybe ask yourself, is this life? Is this enough for, you know, this has value. This is going to help somewhere down the road. So.
Yeah.
I talk to my kids about being book smart versus life smart. And we talk about critical thinking skills and logic in everything way before we decided to make this leap. And I think that's just parenting, right? I mean, if you're gonna throw your laundry in the laundry machine, the washing machine, and not use soap, are your clothes gonna get clean? So you have to think it through, right? So being available to teach them, whether we're homeschooling or cyber schooling or trying to educate them along the way when they're coming home from school. We're just teaching them the skills for life. And hopefully they're not going to leave this journey just book smart.
Right. I think that we all have that same goal in mind that we think about frequently. And just to answer you, Kate, Lacey, it looks like a lot of people have, but Mary Alice was just talking about it for fun. Like, you don't have to register as a name or anything, right, Mary Alice? Like, people just call it that. They might call it that on a resume for a job or something like that, but you don't have to register with anyone. But as Daisy and someone else, Tanya, pointed out, if you are choosing to homeschool, you do have to withdraw your kids from school and turn an affidavit in that's notarized and objectives. So those of you who are doing online school, I highly, highly recommend, if you get 4 weeks in and you're like, oh my God, my kids cannot sit on the computer for 8 hours a day, it's too much for us, you can pull your kids out and homeschool at any time. You can put your kids back in at any time. So even for this year, if you decided, okay, I hate this format, too many hours on the computer, my kid is not learning anything, you can pull them out for the rest of this year, homeschool in whatever capability you want to do, and then you can always re-register them in the fall for next year. And I have a feeling that that is going to be something that many people do if they do insist on continuing with like 8 hours, 7 hours a day on the computer for every class, because it seems like that would get old very quickly and that there wouldn't be a whole lot of learning happening, because I just think it would be easy to like space out, and there's not going to be a whole lot of hands-on and all that kind of stuff. So, that is always a possibility. And I just wanted to put myself out there. If you ever have questions halfway through the school year, you're like, we're done, or 2 weeks from now, you're done, just reach out to me and I can give you this. Any one of us can give you the specifics of what to do.
Yeah, I was going to say that even those, like, especially those who are actually also working full time, you might actually find out that it's easier to homeschool than to stick with that schedule, because you could homeschool, you could shift your schedule when you're teaching your kid in the evening and during the weekends. So there's a lot of flexibility. So I would concur with that, to keep that in mind. You can, and you are legally allowed to in the state of Pennsylvania to come in and out as you please. But you just have to let them know when you have to register.
I hesitate to bring this up because I don't know the details, so I'm hoping Bethany does. But if you find yourself in that position where you're like, man, this is 7 weeks, we can't do this, this is ridiculous, but you know that once things, like if they ever go back to normal and you want to go back in, Bethany, can you talk about how the school district has to share books?
Oh, yes. So if you, let's say, I'm just going to use you, Rebecca, right now. Say 2 weeks in, Maddie's like, Mom, I can't do this anymore. And you guys decide you want to homeschool for the rest of the year. You can call Mount Lebanon and they will like give you a copy of the books to use for the year for homeschooling, and share that. So like if you wanted to stay on pace with school because you're 100% sure you're going to put your kids back in at the end, you can do that. Anyone who's homeschooling can borrow books from the school district. And Mount Lebanon, from what I've heard, it's always been a pretty pleasant school district to work with. So actually most school districts, except for Bethel Park, if you live in Bethel Park, it's another story like Mary Alice, but most school districts are very pleasant. And especially this year, I would assume that you are out of their hair if you are homeschooling. So they will be happy to hand you books and say, we will see you in a year. I do think that there are so many people out there who are like, what if my kids fall behind? And like, my question is, what if they come out ahead because they're doing something different, and I'm not saying that they're definitely going to, but they're, just because someone pulls their kids out to homeschool doesn't mean they're going to fall behind. And they may fall behind a little bit in terms of what's going on in school, but some of their other parts of their lives will become a lot richer, and they'll learn more. So And I promise you that they will be okay in the long run, no matter what you choose. Because as someone said earlier, kids are resilient. Kids are amazing. Like my daughter went to 9th grade for the first time after being homeschooled her whole life, and she's been doing an amazing job. My son, the same. You know, it was fine. And I'm not saying there's never any bumps in the road when you make changes and you choose new paths and stuff, but it will be okay. So no matter what you choose, it will be okay. Your kids will survive. And even if you have to stick with this online schedule and it's a rough year, your kids will be okay. And hopefully soon we will all get back to normal. And Francisco, I was wondering where you disappeared to. That's what life is going to be like at home with Wild Child there, my girl. All right.
I think if anybody could put together a TikTok platform of learning, my child would be fine. So if someone wants to work on that, that would be
Instagram, yeah, great idea.
Right, maybe a combination of the two. That would be.
Oh, that would be so funny.
Or
maybe
I could just
Stella
bring them to your
could
house,
hang out
Bethany.
with her. Yep.
Surprise.
Yeah.
There are short snippet lessons that are on TikTok that homeschoolers use all the time.
She's actually learned a lot of things.
You can think
She's taught me.
Somebody's doing it. There's some.
Yeah.
Talk about life lessons, right, Rebecca? Like TikTok is where it's at, right?
She's learned some good things and some bad things.
I really hate TikTok.
Just like at school.
Hate it. Yep.
That's like at school.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
So you guys, go ahead, Jed.
Okay. We have like 10 more questions that we're obviously not going to get to, but I did want to transition to some small group time just to open up conversation and give some people that are in the trenches of this some time to reach out and ask individual questions. So before we do that, I just want to touch with each panelist. If you could just give one last little tidbit, one little snippet of advice or experience that you've had that you really want to leave them with, I think it would be really helpful. So just little snippet of your wise words, and then we will transition to some small group time. So Bethany, will you go first? What is your small little piece of advice you would like to give?
I think I already said it, is just to try to relax and know that no matter what you do, unless you're like beating your child daily, like no matter what you do, if you go into it with love in your heart and like knowing that, you know, no one loves your kids more than you do, and no one wants better things for your kids than you do, knowing that any choices you make are going to be okay. And you might choose something different down the line, but what you're doing right now is okay. And when I look back to when my kids were younger, I wish I would have just taken a deep breath and relaxed and just had a lot more fun with it instead of worrying about some of the silly things that I worried about, because it all ended up okay.
Thank you.
That's it for me. Yeah.
Tanya, you go next.
Yeah, actually, I would echo that I think that this is going to be really hard because it's such a big transition, and a lot of people are just kind of like jumping in with it. But I think that the best thing I could say is actually it's going to be okay, because even if you just read occasionally and they watched a few documentaries and you did hikes and that's it, the mental health that they will gain from this by, you know, just being home and loved and everything else, I think it's going to be okay. And everyone else is going through this in all of the world, which is actually really somewhat beneficial because we're all going through this. So everyone's going to be behind or whatever, but I think everything's just actually going to be okay.
Thank you, Tanya. Geneva, would you go next?
I think just reiterating what they said, relax. You got it. You got this far. You taught them to talk and use a spoon and dress themselves. you can handle this. Like, don't worry about trigonometry. That's not an issue. Just relax and trust yourself, trust the process, trust your kids. And you may learn that this does not work at all for your family, or you may learn that it's really liberating to separate education from school.
And I don't see Mary Alice at the moment, but Jody, I think you're still with us.
Yep, Jody's there.
Yeah. Jody, would you go next?
Yeah, I think so. For the homeschoolers, the brand new, I'm going to jump into this because this is where we are. You're going to be fine. I'm not that the rest of you are not, but I do feel for you, all of you parents who are working, and I've seen the schedules that are out there for school days, and I understand that it's got to be kind of nerve-wracking, especially with kids who are younger and not really able to sit all day long and work on their own. Maybe some of the older ones will be able to navigate that more easily. But yeah, I don't, it's going to, I don't know what to say. I'm trying to think. Like now, once I saw that schedule that came out, I saw Mount Lebanon, someone shared it with me, and I was kind of shocked by what I saw. So I've sort of been trying to think about, advice that I can give to people, trying to put together ideas that I haven't really formulated yet to try to help that, because I've got lots of neighbors as well who are in the same place and really struggling with how they're going to manage this. So yeah, I will get my brain on it and try to come up with things, and then, hopefully share again in some format, because it's a long day for kids to sit in front of a screen. So I don't know if those are words of wisdom, but it's words of empathy. And I think some of today has been, geared towards homeschooling more so than doing online school at home. So I hope we can answer, some things for you guys as well.
Yep.
All right, we have Mary Alice is trying to get back in, so let me try to get her the link real quick. So many buttons. All right, 1 second. Okay, so at this point, we are going to transition a little bit into some small groups for a little bit of conversation. I was hoping to start these a little bit earlier, but you guys were giving out such great information, and there's just so much to learn that it was so valuable and not worth cutting off. So the questions that I would like for you guys to discuss in the small groups are: what opportunities does this school year bring for your family? What challenges do you anticipate facing? And what could help ease those challenges for you and your family? And where can you find support if you need it? So I'll share those questions in the chat as in the separate groups. We've already done small introductions. If you need some time to reintroduce yourselves, you're absolutely welcome to do that. But I'll go ahead and split you all into small groups. We'll have about 15 minutes in our small groups, and then we'll come back for just a short closing before we go off into the world. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now, and then we'll go to our small groups.